So we've seen so far, North America has yet to find a win, whether it be a set or even a game, not yet. How do you feel? Is there any extra pressure now coming on to the last North American team, at least on the winner side of the bracket, to try and find a win?
Yeah, like, we're NA's last hope. Like, it's nothing to put about it. But, look, I'm trying to do it for the North America up here because EU's showing us up. So we finna go out there and game, you know. And we got to win for Jangaru since his birthday.
Oh, it's his birthday.
Yeah, it's his birthday this week, so we're winning for Jangaru.
Well, happy birthday to Jangaru for this weekend, Privative. I wish you the best of luck in the set. I'll let you get back with the team, and we'll throw it back over to the desk.
All right, a couple important takeaways from the interview. Jangaru's birthday.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That's a big one. And NA's last hope, according to Privative. Not literally, because the teams that lose still have a lower bracket run. However,
no, last hope.
Might be.
We're rewriting history here.
NA is really good at doing that, and so we're hoping that we don't have to. We're hoping
That's like our third joke in that column today.
We're on it. We're in Masters form right now. Going up against EU, Gormizer and Hex Mambo, a team that showed us some good earlier on today. It's a different iteration of Hex Mambo from years of past. It's different from World's Hex Mambo of Season 9. However, it's still clearly a team that can play SMITE really well.
This is a team, and based on what we saw earlier, I think you need to be a little worried about, right? I think this is a team that has a lot to provide. And, you know, we kind of joke, haha, Deathwalker coming in as the coach, but, like, you've got a really stacked, I would argue, right side of the map. Julio, Dzoni, both incredibly good. Julio, for a little bit there, had his stint in the SPL. I think is still that caliber of talent. Right? It's just getting that maturity, I think, in the last year to rise up to that occasion. If you watch what they were doing earlier, I mean, it was just absolute dominance. Julio setting up the kills, Dzoni knocking them down. That made things really easy. I think it's such an easy task with this team to then overlook the other three also being incredibly good players, because you've got two that are almost stealing the limelight every opportunity they go out. I mean, Dzoni was a breath away from potentially getting a pentakill. That's where he died. Otherwise, I mean, that Kali, you survived through that, and it's definitely going to be a different story. And you're starting that on day one, so maybe it's a little recency bias, maybe it was the matchup, but they looked really good, what they were able to bring in. And that's just the right-hand side of the map, and that's one of the more difficult sides. I mean, if you camp solo, the late game, he's still going to be tanky. You camp the jungler, you can cause a lot of trouble, but how much success are you going to find if you're trying to shut down Dzoni, of all people? A lot of experience, not only playing from ahead, but playing from behind, we saw a couple of years ago, can make it look good. And that would then allow Spudio, Hawkk, and the rest to really just free farm, free fire. I think that this is a team that you've got to kind of tackle across the entire board, and that's just going to be difficult, because if you can't spend the entire time making one guy's life hell, the other two or three that are capable of carrying on this team are just going to pick up the slack and knock you away.
It shouldn't have been my takeaway, Gore, but my takeaway from the replay that we just saw was the apple bouncing back and forth in that tiny corridor about 6 times before heading away. You know what? I'm taking up the mantle of NA superfan going into this set. I gave NA a little bit of a rib shot, the rewriting history and all that. No more. I am
well,
because
if you think about it, who was the original history rewriters? That would be England.
That'd be over in EU.
Yeah. So it's Europe.
And Alpha Jackal's casting, so he's got something to say about that on the mic here in just a
I mean,
moment.
look, they even came over here. I'm just saying, Hindu comes over here and took over the entire department. It just tracks with their history.
Gore, I'm gonna go grill a burger.
Yep.
I'm gonna pop a brew, and I'm gonna watch this set, and I'm gonna watch the Athenian Sages, the NA powerhouses, take it to EU.
Yeah.
This is not gonna be close at all.
And you're gonna watch football, not soccer, on the side, just to like really emphatically.
That's right.
Knock it home.
Hooday, Bengals taking it all right now. I can actually say that with some level of seriousness. No, we got to look at this set in through a lens of non-bias score. I do think.
Yeah.
Right, I say that.
The rest of us already were.
Yeah, we have to, Gore. Take a chill pill. No, I think through a lens of non-bias.
Yeah.
It should be a really close set because.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think that this is one we've now said it a couple of times. Could go 3. But as we so often see, and especially because of the timing of this event, a major update just hits.
Yep.
It's day 1 of this event, and so teams have had some time to scrim on it. But I feel like what it largely comes down to is which team has a better instant grasp on the meta and the way to play the game right now. And teams have been playing quickly. Does that pace continue going into game number 1 and the remainder of this set? TBD. Picks and bans between Hex Mambo and the Athenian Sages. So we've already seen a bit of what Hex Mambo want to play and want to prioritize. You want to get the Dzoni on something that he can carry with. What do the Athenian Sages choose to prioritize, though? We know their duo lane between Renjaru and Privative, very talented. Jangaru out of the jungle, their birthday. Of course, carry-style player there as well. Snaddy and Nayhoo, a couple storied SEC players on top of it. And so I think you've got a lot of options as far as where you want to put this pick ban priority.
It's a weird balance as well, right? Because you want to prioritize a little bit towards what we've seen is the meta. You do still have the glory of this being day 1 of a new patch, but a lot of what we've seen today, guess what? The same gods are still more or less causing a lot of trouble. Some differences do exist, but most of those differences are existing in the ban column. They aren't really getting let through too often. So I think I honestly agree with you. I think that leaning over towards, for the Sages, maybe towards their duo lane, I know you're going to have a lot of comfort there. Mid has just enough. I mean, Baba Yaga seems to be at the top, but having a little wiggle room to pick up, your Discordias. Hell, I mean, we saw some Cronoses towards the very end, although I don't know that we're going to see him too often. I think there's definitely some flexibility for a few of the mages. We've also seen some double hunter. So you might not be hard-pressed for Nayhoo on the Sages or for Hawkk on Mambo. But I think that a matchup in the jungle and a matchup in the duo lane is probably where some of the higher priority goes. Hachiman has been very, very popular still. Rom actually taken away, but he's been kind of I would argue the second note who is arguing for first, right? He has been there, and he's technically fallen behind in terms of where people are prioritizing him, but I feel like we've seen him have better performances overall. But that does leave still like your Kernanos. I think we saw an Ishtar earlier. A couple of hunters that haven't really been at the forefront. And so you maybe don't even need to prioritize that now that Rom's gone. I mean, what are they going to do? Izanami's also been relatively popular. And so you have some flexibility there. I think right here I wouldn't mind, well, I was going to say jungle support. They grab potentially one of those, though we've seen Thor go solo sometimes too.
But we've also seen Thor out of the jungle today.
Yeah.
Rapio,
and he looks good in the jungle.
Looked just fine to me.
Huh.
Anhur changed a little bit, if I remember correctly. I think shifting sands slows you a bit more nowadays. Didn't expect to see Anhur prioritized because of it. Seems a bit different from what has been at the top of the Hunter pool here recently.
Yeah.
Hachiman, the least surprising. But Anhur Gore adds a little extra CC to the composition already. Solo potential, big burst damage as well, follow-up. And so if the Sages are hoping to pick individual targets, they got another avenue of doing so.
I can't believe you'd overlook that his attack speed was raised from 0.9 to 1.0.
That's my fault.
Which actually, jokes aside, maybe it makes a small difference. Probably not a huge enough difference in the grand scheme. That was the only other change. But shifting sands slowing a lot more is actually really, it's a huge deal, right? You're already talking about a guy that has good lane, like you had said, potential, fight potential. He can stun you. He has a lot of damage. If you don't hit the stun, though, if you hit the impale, maybe it just doesn't connect, it doesn't go far enough for the wall, what have you, and you get slowed late game by 40%, and that's not like, hey, I hit you for 40% of a slow. It's, hey, anybody in this area is now 40% slower. I mean, you're suddenly like that Thor is going to be hitting a lot more, a lot easier. You're going to have a lot, your mid laner, whether it's a Discordia, now that Baba Yaga's off the table, maybe it's something else. But they're all going to be able to hit their abilities a lot quicker, a lot easier. It's going to give you some control in a team fight. And in the 1v1, right? I'm actually really excited to see what he does. I'm also really curious. I doubt it's going to happen, but we've seen Anhur, in this conversation right now where some people are arguing that mages are definitely a lot weaker. Who takes that place? At least in the past, we've seen a lot of carries that have flexed over towards mid. One of the more successful carries that has almost consistently done it has been the Anhur. So he has a little bit of flex potential up at the front as well. Similar to the Thor, where it's like you're probably going to the role we expect you to go, but you could shimmy over if you really need to, just to provide a little extra strength or a little flexibility for the Sages.
Sylvanus is the support pick for the Sages, Gore. I'm looking at Privative's page.
Yeah.
They've had an unbelievable last 3 sets in the North American SEC. Won 6 straight games. Privative's KDA 0-2-11, 0-2-11, 0-0-14, 0-3-8, 0-0-8, 0-1-8. I mean, as supportive a KDA as you can possibly get. No kills, really low deaths, medium to high number of assists in all the recent games that Privative has played. More recently, against the Aru Scorpions, final set of the phase, Sylvanus 0-1-8. So Priv has really stood out as one of the best support players in the North American SEC. You're providing good burst damage kill potential over there on that duo lane core. Sylvanus pull, Anhur stun, Desert Fury, knock. I mean, there's a lot.
It's CC Central.
There's a lot. And then you get knocked up from the ults, you get jumped on by an Anhur, you get knocked up, tossed aside. Hex Mambo have got to play that duo lane carefully.
There's a genuine world where you are either not moving and potentially not even getting to play much of the game for like a solid 5 straight seconds if they can chain their CC properly. And it's just, you know, like you said, a knock-up into a root, into potentially a knock-up, into a stun, into a slow. Like, there's so much that can stack on top of it.
Yep.
And that's assuming you live through all of it. I do think that they've got maybe not as much kill pressure as what you could typically lock in with an Anhur, maybe like a Ymir that gives a wall to stun up against. But I think that you've given exactly what you need, which is a god that loves to fight and is good at it, and then a god that is going to keep you locked down so that the other guy's going to hit you more often.
Yep. Serqet, talk about more lockdown, Gore.
Yeah.
You got it for the Athenian Sages.
Wild.
Really good jungle pick, not only in the SPL towards the end of that stretch, saw it in the SEC a bit as well. Remember the critical strike that you just now get every time you level up your ultimate, the critical strike chance, has synergized with that kit pretty well. Only need a crit item or 2 to really feel strong, and even if you choose not to get any crit, you got a decent amount of crit chance late in the game just through in-kit built-in critical strike chance. Maui have not seen a lot of.
Nope.
A little bit here and there in the SPL, 0 so far here at this tournament. Could say the same about Loki, but it's Johnny we're talking about. And so Johnny's Loki makes a bit of sense.
Honestly, yeah. I think that it's you know, we've talked a lot about the Sages draft, and maybe even Criminal at this point, simply because Hachi, Guan, Baba as the top 3, with Maui now locked in. And, I'm going to admit, I just have bias toward Maui. I think he's really good, and I think in the right hands, he does amazing. And so I have a lot of trust in that. And like you said, when it comes down to Loki, I genuinely think I would probably rip this pick apart, or maybe not rip it apart, but I'd be down on it if it was literally anybody that wasn't Johnny. But because it's Johnny, you might get a pentakill this game, man. It's just so insane the level that he brings to this. This is a pick, for those of you who are maybe unaware, but a couple of years ago in the SBL, it was permabanned from them, because if Johnny had Loki, they won the game. It was just that simple, and hopefully, at least for the Sages here, that's not going to be the case.
And that's one thing we talked about going into picks and bans is we know that Johnny is going to get a carry-style jungler. And look, the Sages, they send an Ao Kuang ban, they send a Kali ban, a Fenrir ban, all towards Johnny.
Yep.
Erlang Shen was also banned out. I guess you always have to expect the Loki, but somewhere in the... that had to be far in the back of the Sage's mind. He's just going to go to Loki when it's all said and done, but got to consider it. It's one of Johnny's better picks. A Ra ends the draft for the Athenian Sages Gore, and I think that just amplifies a lot of what we've already talked about with the Sages. You get a Searing Pain, but what is there setting up for it? A Thor, a Sylvanus, a Serqet, potentially an Anhur. Lots of individual targets are going to be under threat here if the Sages have their way.
Yeah, I think that the thing that the Sages are bringing is a very different, not even different style, but it's going to play out differently than what we've seen from a lot of these. You're looking at a lot of capability in lane. I mean, a Serqet goes up, grabs one of you, taunts one of you even. Doesn't even have to be the ult, and all of a sudden there's a raw beam and your health is just gone. You're lucky if you're still alive afterward. You add that in with good Thor rotations, the fact that Anhur, Sylvanus theoretically can have a pretty good boxing lane. I think Maui's going to give them a little bit of trouble. Hachi's safe enough that they're probably not going to find a lot of kills. If you're going to get one, it's going to be sub 5, right? If Hachi gets his ult, 9 times out of 10, that dude's getting out of there. He's going to be just fine. Maui gets his ult. He's going to be able to peel for him. So you're really looking for some early pulls, early stuns, early damage. I think, from the Sages, but it scales pretty well into the late game. It's coming together as a team, and more specifically having to deal with the fact that, you've got Maui, Guan, a lot of tankier targets, some safety on the other side as well, coming out of Hex Mambo, that suddenly the Thor feels like, okay, if you dive into the back, how long are you surviving? And not only how long are you surviving, but if you're in the back, how much damage are you able to get done, or disruption? Is it actually causing an impact? And while you're doing that, is Johnny just running ramping in the back line and giving hell to this Ra, or giving hell to this Anhur? So there's really definitely... Look, there's a lot of paths, a lot of avenues. I think that I like the Sages, but it does feel like if they play... If we get to like 20 minutes and there's 2 kills on the board, period, I have less faith in what the Sages draft is going to do. It looks like one that wants to fight, looks like one that should be fighting, and will find more success if it can get their hands active in the game.
You know what's funny is a couple weeks ago, if you said, if we got to 20 minutes with like 2 kills on the board, I'd be laughing, because that was it. We were getting to 20 minutes with only 2 kills on the board 90% of the time. However, I'm laughing for the other. It feels like no chance we're getting to 20 minutes with only 2 kills on the board from the meta.
Look, with a draft like this, if you don't have 2 kills by 10 minutes, you've probably done something wrong.
That's right. Well, Gore, look, we talked to Privative in the pregame interview and mentioned a couple of the talking points. Not only Jangaru's birthday, jungler for the Sages, but in a way, long SMITE history has these NA versus EU rivalries.
Yeah.
We don't get as much now because the SPL is all here in-house. However, at these types of events, you get the NA SEC and the EU SEC. That's where a lot of the rivalry has shifted towards. EU has dominated day number 1 so far, winning every single set where they've played an NA opponent. All 3, by the way. So, set 4 of the day. Set 4 of NA versus EU. Can the Athenian Sages turn the tides in game number 1? We'll find out with the casters.
Yeah, we'll see if the Athenian Sages can be North America's last hope, or are the Hex Mambo going to make this a clean EU sweep for day number 1? It all starts here, though. In game number 1, it's J-Mag, Alpha Jackal, and Doug here for game 1 of our 4th and final set here on day 1 of the SMITE Masters. Hex Mambo sticking to a lot of what works for these teams out here. We see Johnny going back to one of his signature picks on this Loki. Hawkk sticking to the Baba Yaga, which works so well. I look at the Athenian Sages comp, and I see a Season 3 style of draft where the only thing missing is the Erlong Shen that used to kind of run along with this competition. Unfortunate for the Sages, that one does get banned away, but feels like a really old school style of draft, but it just feels like it fits their play style so well.
It does, and I think it fits the meta quite well as well. I mean, you have a very aggressive style of dual lane, a great engage coming out from that support, great engage coming out from your solo and your jungle, all to set up this Ra. Don't forget, his heal may have got nerfed, and in fact it doesn't have scaling like everything does, but in a trade-off, he's got more power in it, he's got more protections in it, he's got so much more to it. I mean, look at the stats. 30 protections, how much magical power? 40, 30 physical power as well? It's a nightmare to fight in that thing.
Especially if you drop it around, say, like tower lines, objectives, really get that extra kind of burst there. So Ra, maybe surprising that we haven't seen him in a while, but now we're going to see how Nayhoo can perform on a pick like this, and looks a nice and easy clear for he and Snaddy to kind of start this game out for the Athenian Sages. But kind of maybe at least the curve of this game, kind of how the game may scale for these two. Is this a composition for Hex Mambo, AJ, that's really looking to get to that late game, or is this one that you want to get maybe a little bit more involved with early game?
It's difficult to say because the Athenian Sages draft just does so well across the board. I mean, early game you're looking at their dual lane to just push things down like they are doing right now. Mid game and late game you're looking at the Nayhoo, looking at Jangaru to really carry it. So for Hex Mambo, they have to be on their game throughout the entirety of this game, otherwise they will fall behind and they will get undone.
Cozyx gonna pull in Priv, swings in, only catches Renjaru with it, but it's good damage, pulls him back in and forces the leap away from the Hunter. And I think maybe that's where we can put our next little point there, is the Anhur. We've been seeing a lot of things like the Cernunnos, the Ishtar, Rom, Hachi, the top of the meta picks. Been a while since we've seen Anhur kind of pop his way out.
Yeah, but I think it's a great response into a jungler like Johnny. Johnny's a very aggressive jungler that wants to get on top of the ADCs as much as possible. So what do? Put a massive slow in front of him, 40, 50%, make it impossible for him to get anywhere near you. And I go, right, come on, fight me, Johnny. I dare you. I double dare you to come anywhere near me, and I will win this fight for the first time ever.
So we'll have to see maybe where Johnny kind of weasels his way around the map. We'll see what Jangaru's response to that one is as well on the Serqet. Has seen some slight changes, not from 10.6, but just kind of that bonus pass to hit right before with a little bit less crit chance, at least in that ultimate ability, a little less prot shred too. So I'm curious where the build path goes. Maybe for Jangaru, see if we see things shifted up here. Because we haven't seen a little bit more tanky items kind of pop its way through. Maybe not necessarily full on today, but at least over the course of the day we've been seeing some kind of more tank style of items popping up in some of these junglers.
Yeah, I think the Fenrir was, with Rapio, was one of the first ones that really bought into it a lot, where he went first item into his Jotuns, and then every other item after that was a tank item. Serqet definitely fits that bill as well. I would not be surprised to see a similar, if not carbon copy build to what he did with the Stone of Binding coming out as the second item. Serqet was doing that even before the changes to these 10.6 came out. So going very defensive, very tanky, very difficult to deal with, and we'll be doing the exact same thing here.
Well, Jangaru actually scares Johnny away from the camp, jumping in with this Serqet and even getting Nayhoo to rotate over. Cozyx on the Maui. We haven't seen as much Maui here in year 10. It's been a little bit quieter of a performance from that support. A couple of players still popping that one through, so very excited to see what Cozyx and Privative can bring out onto both of these supports, as they're not the most common ones up into the lane, but feel like they both do very similar things, that kind of range initiation and kind of those range starts of fights.
Yeah, and I like the supports for them. That's probably my favorite style of support, is being, a bit further back around your team, comfortable engages, or you have those big AoE 4-5-man huge highlight reel plays where you just go in and win the team fight single-handedly because you got one good ultimate off. I mean, we saw it at Worlds with Genetics. One of the first games on Maui has 5-man ultimate over the wall, wins again for his team. That's exactly what Cozyx is hoping to replicate here.
Yeah, earning himself at least the respect of never being able to play that Maui again for the remainder of that tournament, even for at least a part of the early new season for himself. So we'll see if any sort of highlight plays do come from these two supports, from these lanes in general. Shield buff does get dropped, at least by the Athenian Sages, to start things out early and make sure that they can get themselves a little bit of that extra neutral farm, because with the 10.6, I think it's something that we talked a little bit about earlier. A lot of these neutral camps, the mid camps, the shield, the cooldown buffs, giving a little bit more bang for your buck by trying to take those ones out.
Yeah, it's where you're going to see most of the early game leads come out from. If there's not going to be a first blood for the first 5-10 minutes, which, as the Des was saying, in this game, something's gone horribly wrong if it has done. Those mid camps, like you mentioned, those shield buffs, those cooldown buffs, those are the things which you're going to see give you that early game lead, give you that 1,000 gold in 10 minutes lead, give you that 1,500 gold in 10 minutes lead, and allow you to start really putting your mark on the Gold Fury.
Already seeing at least the small sway in gold here for the Athenian Sages, only to the tune about 500 gold, at least to start things out, just teetering around about 800, 900 XP as well. So a very slow start for both these teams. Neither really wanting to get active. Privative just now getting that Gauntlet of Thebes online and heading back over towards Duo, which is something that at least in this season, Age, I've noticed has been, supports have been staying around the Duo lane much longer than they have in past seasons.
Yeah, I don't think they want to really impose too much on the jungle and the mid lane right now. They want to wait for them to get a few, few of these camps by themselves, get a few lanes by themselves, really get that first item online. Because until your mage does get the item and a half that they need to start being effective, they need babysitting. And they need babysitting from the jungler rather than the support, because the jungler's the one's going to do the damage, and then your mid lane mages are the ones going to do the CC.
Johnny's been putting a lot of respect towards Jangaru on this right side mid harpy. A couple of times we panned over, Johnny starts it, immediately sees the Serqet and backs away from it, even with backup. Now maybe a 3v2 as a potential invade started up, but with seeing that there's more people there, and instead starts over on the opposite side of the map. Both ultimates used by the duo of the Sages, but not even able to secure out the shield buff. So no defense is used aside from the beads on Spudio.
Yeah, rather odd engage there. I mean, I thought if Privative and Renjaru were going to go aggressively use both their ultimates, they were going to try and make sure Spudio was the victim of both of them, but it looked like he took no damage from either of them, which is very strange.
Able to get those fast beads, maybe stops him from the pull, from the knockup going through, fast dash out. Spudio and all of Hex Mambo probably happy to see that the dual lane has now expended both of their ultimates. But is this even a call for Johnny to go to that side? I mean, instead of going for something like a Jotun's Gone Transcendence, typically a little bit slower pace of a start, is this even an opportunity for Johnny, or is this just, okay, they used ultimates, we're safe for the next 90 seconds?
No, I think with the way the game's been going so far for Hex Mambo, they're playing a reactionary game. They are waiting until a big opportunity presents itself. I don't think the fact that the ultimates have been used by Privative and Renjaru, if we saw the beads taken off from the Anhur as well, that's the call for Dzoni to go over and then start to wreak havoc, because there's no CC immunity there for the Anhur. Until then, just farm up, get yourself to mid-game, get yourself a few items online. Just take it cool, take it slow, wait to see what the Athenian Sages bring, because don't forget, they haven't played this team yet. This is another new style of meta, new take on the meta that we're seeing coming out in this game.
Snaddy. Quick
Goodbye.
ultimate out. Sees that Johnny is rotating over. He'll go up to the sky, head right back towards wave. But speaking of maybe new things that we don't see very often, Pythax piece for Nayhoo in the mid lane. We saw this sometimes with solo lane Guardians. Privative will use the ult immune out. Now Jangaru instead ults a minion, throws it in, gets the explosion on top of Spudio, and a jump in. Privative gonna strike first blood for the Athenian Sages, and now Cozyx standing back will wisely not step up to the 3 strong. The Athenian Sages might try and go for the camp, but gonna be outnumbered here by the Sages.
I think, judging by the camera, Jangaru didn't actually mean to ult the minion. I think there was just a bit of a mistake there, but he gets the kill either way. Spudio, wrong way in terms of trying to get back to his tower. Need to go around the top of the gold field to the safety of his jungler and mid laner that were rotating. But great first blood there from the Athenian Sages. Put themselves up over 1,000 gold as the landfall comes out from Cozyx. Not catching anything out there.
Yeah, fast jump by Renjaru gets him over the ultimate from Cozyx, and with first blood now in the pocket of the Athenian Sages, that gives them a little over 1,000 gold lead to start this game. Was sitting around 500 with just the neutral farm, but first blood plus a little bit of extra waves now pushed them up to about 1,300. Privative's not done yet. He wants to keep this fight going, knowing Spudio's beat's still on cooldown, but just off the mark with finding that pull.
I mean, look at the level lead in mid lane as well. It's a level and a half for Nayhoo on this Ra. Hawkk has had to rotate a couple times into the jungle, over towards the dual lane just then. Didn't quite make his full rotation. Over towards his solo lane to help secure that blue buff. Nayhoo's been solo farming in mid, and it's really shown. You pointed out that Pythax piece earlier. That just tells me that every single team fight that the Athenian Sages take from mid-game onwards is going to be focused on Nayhoo. Every single time they have the opportunity to stand around him, protect him, and peel for him, they are going to do so, and he's going to reward them with that nice, big AoE heal.
Big heal for him, some extra power and lifesteal for the team on top of the extra power and protections that he gets from it. I mean, so much that you can stack up with this Raw. It does feel kind of like that almost 4 protect 1 style of strategy. Protect the president more than anything else here for the Sages. I gotta see exactly what they decide to do with their lead. It was put pressure in dual lane, try and get Renjaru ahead, get Privative some extra levels as well. But it's mostly just been reflected, as you say, in the solo farm for Nayhoo.
Yeah, and I like what Jangaru has been doing as well. He's not been giving Dzoni any form of breathing room in the jungle. He's invaded onto the back camps on the right-hand side. Yet again, has got a ward drop there to be able to make sure he has that timer up through and through. And it's just trying to make sure that this Loki's farm is slowed down. It's not something we have seen many teams attempt to do for Dzoni, but because he's been playing Bakasuras, playing Aokwongs, playing Kalis, who you don't want to mess with in the jungle. But instead of Loki, as a Serqet, that's a fight you can take.
We'll see if Jangaru ever gets active against Johnny, at least in these early stages of the game. But I think my eyes are going to come right over to this little spot here in just a couple of minutes. This first beacon spawn, maybe the first team fight, might even be one of the first times we see Privative really rotate himself out of lane, as he and his opposition, Cozyx, have now made their way over towards mid. Green buff picked up by Priv. But really that first fight around this beacon is probably where most of my attention will be for the Sages, for Mambo, to see what kind of reaction that we get out of Hex Mambo.
No, I would be hesitant if I was Hex Mambo to really fight over it. Because what we've seen from North American teams especially, as Jangaru goes in, misses the Cobra's Kiss and has to dash away, but Dzoni goes straight in!
Double stun by him. Landfall, not going to pull anything as Privative used his ultimate for the immunity. Does find the pull on the Hawkk to yank him back through, and now Jangaru goes in. Ultimate from Hawkk, just to give himself some safety, but a dunk in by Snaddy. A turn and burn to the mid laner is just enough as Snaddy picks up the first kill of the fight, and the Athenian Sages will back away with their victory.
I was going to say, that's exactly what's going to happen if they fight over the Stygian Beacon, but Snaddy makes his rotation a minute and a half early and says, thank you very much, that's a kill for me, and that's another death on the call of Hex Mambo. 2-0 up now at Athenian Sages, and NA's last hope here looking strong in game number 1.
First seed from North America, talking with Priv, saying, we are the last hope. We got to try and find at least one win
Spudio,
for
no.
NA. Maybe a pick here, but just off the mark with that Cobra's Kiss. Spudio able to dash back out. Prudiv's not going to let him go so freely, even going so far as to chasing him through the jungle to try and deny him from this purple, but realizing he might be a little far out of position, Privative will back away. As we're just a little over a half-minute away from this first beacon.
I wonder if we're going to see Privative do the CDR minigame that we see loads of Sylvanus players do once they hit level 15. Just the second you see any seed on the map, like you see 3 right there, walk over, pick it up, get yourself a second off your cooldowns. It really is a major power spike for the Sylvanus. Probably the biggest power spike you can see in any god in the game. From 0.25 seconds off your cooldown to 1 second, it's huge.
Yeah, you definitely feel the impact once that goes through. Get your starter item, get your passive enhanced up. Feels great as a Sylvanus player at that point. Snaddy back over to the right side, just keeping Julio in check over in the solo lane. And we do see at least this first beacon going over likely to the Sages. Not much contest coming out from Hex Mambo. It's only their mid laner here immediately in the lane, but now with Cozyx rotating in, might see a fight brew through. Cozyx charges up the hook, just misses. A little off the point there. Nayhoo stands by to give a heal over to his support. Just a couple of seconds away. If someone just steps on with them, then the Athenian Sages can take this beacon. Jangaru standing by, needs to just move over a little bit. They're like 1 second off, 1 standing point away from being able to grab it. No, it has not been claimed just yet. It's a root on the Cozyx. Now with Johnny and Hawkk stepping in, it's going to go back the opposite way. The Sages taking a while to try and claim it.
Well, Cozyx playing with fire there, just standing in the middle of just almost daring them to engage onto him, but that is going to be a slight turnaround. This Stygian beacon still not been claimed as Cozyx and Johnny make the rotation over the left. Johnny, a bit low, but Renjaru has been caught out a little bit there by the slow, but that's, again, I'd say a little bit of a botched engage there.
Yeah, maybe calling the card a little bit early has Hex Mambo, but now it's a full rotation back over towards the beacon. It's only Nayhoo who's standing by. Ult is there. Snaddy has made his rotation through as well, but too little too late.
Wow.
Took a little over a minute to do so, but the first beacon of the game goes over to Hex Mambo. A nice little buff over to the team. The movement speed, the damage towards structures, and that Unleashed Titan. Curious is to see how these two teams will play around that new objective.
I mean, I wasn't really expecting the Hex Mambo to be able to secure that first one. Their team composition really struggling at this stage of the game, with Julio not electing to rotate over and Spudio stuck over in that dual lane. That mid 3v3 certainly goes away to the Athenian Sages 9 times out of 10, I would say. So the fact that they managed to pick the first Stygian beacon is a huge boon to them, giving themselves 5% extra tower damage and 1% extra movement speed. That 1%, it's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, especially if you can get those extra stacks through as the game goes on. Cozyx in the middle of 2, while Renjaru keeps Spudio busy over by the purple buff. It's all just to buy time for Renjaru inside of this jungle. That's the one good thing that Anhur has early, is that boxing capability with the passive, with that ultimate. If you can land every single one of those spears so devastating, and Jangaru, he's going to land a lot of damage on a Johnny. Not able to steal the green buff away, but able to chunk away at the jungler's HP.
I mean, you have to think that one of those parts of the dash might have been a crit as well. I know it doesn't look like that's possible, given that Jangaru hasn't built any crit, but don't forget the changes that did happen to Serqet a while back, where she does get crit on her ultimate. Or just a little bit of crit chance from it. Has been nerfed a little bit, down to I think it's 20% now at max rank, so not going to be critting as much, but still has that potential to just chunk you unexpectedly.
Yeah, some of those changes up to last breath. Still decent damage that goes through, the true damage hitting, the one little second stun with it, but as you mentioned, that crit chance now in. Blink over the wall. Misses just about everything, trying to take those ones away, but it looks like they did split at least those Oracle Harpies, so no vision immediately inside the pit. Spudio going to be rooted out by Priv. Fast ultimate to get away and turns back through because Johnny is here. Goes in for the damage. Still has ultimate available. Will use it to get the PEs away from Renjaru. Shell from Privative, and now potential to box back, but range damage from Spudio. Can Cozyx find the landfall? No. Just a little too slow through in the root, making sure to keep him at bay, but all the while, the Athenian Sages on the Pyromancer. So it's going to be Jangaru holding on to it. Try and take that one down, but Hawkk has steal potential. Got to keep eyes on the mid.
In the meantime, the gold period looks like it's taken down here by Hex Mambo. Snaddy up in the sky, lands down. Only catches 1, but it is Cozyx.
Does find the wall and the double tap onto 2. Ultimate from Cozyx misses where Priv was walking through, and that's a landfall on cooldown. Both soul laners have rotated over. Hawkk goes up for the ultimate. It's an immediate dash out by Jangaru. A lot of ultimates used, but no blood spilled just yet in the fight.
Yeah, both objectives threatened, both objectives taken very low, but in the end, neither objective taken. So good defense is coming out from both teams here. And it feels like Hex Mambo has stabilized this game. It was under threat for the Athenian Sages to start just snowballing it out of control, with Jangaru really setting the pace. But now, Hex Mambo, they've managed to slow it down. They've calmed things quite considerably. And now the opportunity to probably take a fight in their own terms, in their own favor, if they can find one.
Pyromancer still up. Gold Fury available. Where will the Sages go with it? It's a 2,500 gold lead, but haven't really been able to pull too much from it. Some damage towards Cozyx, but nothing that he won't be able to resustain back off with the help of just his natural HP 5 and everything else going through with. Taking a look over at Snaddy's build. Starting out with a little bit of damage. Soul Eater just to give him some sustain. But Glad Shield immediately into the Manticore Spike. We did see a buff come towards this item. We saw it, I think it was game 1 of our day, had 3 of them built through, but only going to see 1 of them so far this game, AJ.
Yeah, it's what you need to be able to try and take down the tankier targets this match. You need as much out-of-pocket penetration as possible, so you're going to have a few Sunders come out, which is what you see supports build. In fact, you see Julio also building it on the side of Hex Mambo, so 3 total this game. You're going to want to see Manticore Spikes, you're going to want to see just some damage coming out from your protections, like you see with the Glad Shield. Anything you can do to help heighten your damage, like the Ethereal Staff coming out from Nayhoo, is going to be a big boon to your team.
Yeah, it really feels like kind of proc item, so I've kind of made its way back here for all of these players. As you saw, Beacon charging means we're about 2 minutes out from the Beacon respawning back in for its second course through. Remember, you need all 3. Get that Titan to start pushing down the lanes. But Pyromancer started up by Jangaru, though, taking probably way more damage than he had expected from there. Cozyx in the middle of 4, stunned by Snaddy, but immediately able to get back out. Athenian Sages trying to pull this Pyromancer, but the last couple of times have come up unsuccessful in doing so.
Julio forced to teleport to mid to be able to help his team defend this objective, but everybody's backing off already. And Hawkk, he's only had this Prophetic Cloak for about 2 minutes. He already has 17 stacks.
It's pretty good.
It's borderline broken. At this point, I was about to say, if you're a support looking at this, you are just looking on in pure envy at how fast this thing is being stacked.
So what you're telling me is I need to play Baba's support now, so that way I can still get the benefit.
Twitch chat, I do not say anything. He's twisting my words here. I need my lawyer, okay? I'm calling him my lawyer.
No, we have seen this become pretty much a staple in a lot of Baba Yaga builds, just about every mid laner at the SPL level, getting that 3rd, 4th item, kind of depending on how long the game may go through. So not uncommon to see what Hawkk has been going for, at least in his build. I think the most uncommon thing is just what Nayhoo has done with his build. As mentioned earlier, the Pythags, now the Ethereal Staff, and the Charon's Coin. Maybe going for a bit of an oddball to start out his. Wall double tap onto Hawkk will do some decent damage from Snaddy. And the Beacon spawning in a moment. Looks like we're going to have a big group up this time for a fight.
Yeah, but no Johnny or Julio. Those 2 power players at the desk were mentioning. They're both over on the right-hand side. In fact, just backing now is Johnny. And it looks like this one is going to be given up here by the Mambo. They are jostling for position, but it's just the 2 of them. And they can't push in here. The Stygian Beacon is going to be going to the Athenian Sages.
Yeah, 3 in pocket here for the Sages on top. Spudio stuck at his tier 2 tower. Surprised Renjaru didn't even just go for the impale. Might have had it on cooldown at that point. But Beacon number 2 of the game now goes over to the Athenian Sages. They will start this out. A good pull on a Cozyx, but no major follow-up. Johnny goes in, but Jangaru is there to back him up. Jangaru does get the taunt at the end. It's a little more damage, but it's not going to be enough. Even Renjaru's ult just out of range from clipping Johnny this time through. The Athenian Sages, Hex Mambo square off in a 2v2. Will come up empty-handed.
He got one thing from Renjaru there that he wants to get off, and that was the Aegis, but still a little bit of CC immunity coming out from that Desert Fury means that he's going to be A-OK. Jangaru investing in the Blink, investing into the Last Breath, all just to try and peel Johnny off. He did have to use both his relics and his ultimate, so no safety left on this Loki for the next about 60 seconds, but that's 60 seconds of breathing room for the Sages.
The Sages haven't gotten that second beacon. It'll be a little more time before we see that final one spawn, and then we get to see where the Titans end up clashing through, which lane they'll go to. I mean, just immediately looking, seems like mid lane might be the option. And Gold Fury for the Athenian Sages to start this out.
No one's around.
Hex Mambo, they missed the call. The Athenian Sages is going to grab an objective, and look where Snaddy is the whole time. He's making sure that Pyromancer's not started by Mambo. First Fury of the game goes to the Sages.
Yeah, it opens up a 4,500 gold lead. Experience, though, dead even. Wow, that is surprising to see the experience instead, even given the disparity in gold. Just means that Hex Mambo maybe have been splitting their waves a little bit better, whilst the neutral farm that has been so contestable, Athenian Sages have managed to eke out themselves. But for Hex Mambo, it's not a worry at this point. 4,500 gold, it's probably about the edge, the limit that you want to keep it within. Anything beyond, you're starting to panic a little bit. But the fact that the experience is dead even means that you're hitting home soon. You're almost at home base.
Yeah, it's always kind of just the question of, where a lot of that gold is allocated as well. Is it 1,000 in one person's pocket versus nothing in somebody else? Seems like just about everybody's got about an 800 to 1,000 lead on the side of the Athenian Sages to keep themselves up with this nice and comfortable 4,000 gold lead. The question then is now, like, what do the Sages do? I mean, the Gold Fury is down, Pyromancer's still up. Is that the next point, maybe the next place where the Athenian Sages go to try and get some pressure?
Has to be a Pyromancer here for the Athenian Sages. They can't let Hex Mambo be able to take this one. Mainly because if they do, then for this Fire Giant fight, they've got something comparable to Raw Snipe to be able to contest and probably save that objective. If the Athenian Sages had the Pyromancer bomb, their Fire Giant's almost guaranteed at that point. If they do a well-timed Raw Snipe with the bomb, that's a brilliant secure of over 2,500 damage.
Privative walking forward, aiming for a pull if he can get it, or just a zone out. Pyro started again, but immediately reset once more. The Athenian Sages pick it back up, but 4 strong of Hex Mambo standing by. Jangaru and Snaddy standing off to the side. A lot of potential initiation from these assassins. Jangaru spotted out. The Athenian Sages back away. Jangaru standing a little too far in no man's land.
Yeah, but that's what you want to do as Jangaru if you are this Serqet player. You want to hide yourself around and behind the enemy lines. You want to make sure you're catching anybody who dares retreat away by themselves. You are the silent assassin that picks people off in the night, just one by one, killing people who are just unsuspecting to it.
Cozyx standing near as the Pyromancer pulled once more by the Sages. Hawkk is here to throw out some extra pot shot damage for the team to maybe try and grab this one. Snaddy up to the sky. The Sages get the Pyromancer. Privative takes a lot of damage, and Snaddy dunks in, finds the back line. Hawkk gets a nice little bit of heal, and Snaddy does some decent damage back, but look at Cozyx in the back line trying to keep it through. Oh, from Privative, a pull back in. Cozyx is fine, and so is Hex Mambo, but Hawkk doesn't want to give up this chase. Throws out the ultimate and scares the Sages away.
Yeah, that is a great secure there for the Sages. As we were talking about before, massive secure now on the Fire Giant. If they do choose to go for that, can get themselves this mid-tier 1, which is, it's due to go down soon. Speaking of soon, the beacons are charging, so about a couple minutes until we do see the contest over the 3rd and final beacon. Who's going to get the extra 5% structure damage and 1% movement speed over the other team? We'll find out in a couple minutes.
And then we're going to see the Titans search for it and see what kind of a fight that we get from there. We've had a couple of games where Titans are kind of pushing up with it at that point. They're already getting to an end point. We've seen a couple games end before the Titan even has a chance to come out. And we got to see our last game where a Titan's pushing up right and you can't even end the game because the Titan's not there to do anything. So, with how even this game is, though, I mean, we're only sitting 1 tower deficit for Hex Mambo, that being their tier 1 over in the dual lane. Maybe unlikely, given the state of the game, that it could swing open and just be a complete end here for the Sages, but could open the door and get some pressure in one of these lanes to maybe push for another objective.
Oh, it has to be over towards the Fire Giant that both these teams have to be thinking about now. Hex Mambo, they've got to stop the Athenian Sages taking it, otherwise the lead then snowballs to a point where it's out of control for Athenian Sages. Stop Hex Mambo from taking it, otherwise that's a route back into the game for them. So it's almost, both teams, they do want it, but not maybe for the reasons that they will utilize it to push, more so to deny the opposition team.
Beacon is a little bit away. Sages already in position to get this fight started up. Primal Fury is now respawned as well, so another option for the Sages should they give up the beacon, maybe go somewhere else. As a push up towards mid to try and keep some pressure on the tier 1 tower. Seems that Hex Mambo probably unlikely to be able to step in towards this one because it is a full group up minus Jangaru here for the Sages. A pull on the Cozyx. Get some decent damage through. Even that beam coming in from Nayhoo puts Cozyx down to about half HP. Gonna need to resustain because he is not healthy enough for this fight.
No, I think with that poked down onto your support, that could potentially just be the beacon fight taken care of already. He's going to get poked down a bit. Julio's forced to engage. Snaddy!
Snaddy?
Snaddy?
Up to the sky just in time. Fast dunk out, and maybe now an opportunity for the Hex Mambo to jump in towards this beacon. Kaz is going to stand on with Spudio, and just like that, Snaddy poked to under half HP. The Sages, for the moment, were giving up beacon, but now it's Hex Mambo giving up. This is a back and forth, a seesaw around the beacon, but instead it's a call for Primal Fury by the Athenians, or by Hex Mambo, I should say. Athenian Sages even give up the beacon to try and stop this one. It is back and forth in this jungle.
They needed to make a commit there because now, look, they've just done some of the hard work for the Athenian Sages. Down half health on the Gold Fury already. Probably down to 20. Sages take it away.
Sages get up, and now Privative is low, trying to run through, but Julio is chasing him down, up onto the cavalry, and down goes the tree. A stun under Renjaru in the backline will force him out, and Jangaru losing out on the 1v1 against Dzoni. Run as fast as you can, little Serqet, because Dzoni is here. and it's 2 kills now for Hex Mambo as they turn this fight right back around. Renjaru pulled back in and nowhere to go. It's 3 for Mambo.
EU supremacy, we are here to stay. Oh, Dawson, I am sorry, but I'm a big EU fanboy here. We are mortal enemies to this. You couldn't tell me just quietly fist bumping as, you know, the Jangaru falls down to Dzoni. I'm sorry, I can't do it to a man on his birthday, but I have to.
Fire Giant, though, half HP. Sages walk up. It's just Snaddy and Nayhoo here. Nayhoo does not have ultimate yet. Fire Giant low, but now it seems to have given up as Nayhoo and Julio are just toying with Nayhoo in the backline. They will not let this man get through. Hex Mambo in one fell swoop are able to pick up 3 kills and a Fire Giant for the squad.
Yeah, those are the first 3 kills that they've had all game as well. First 26 minutes, nothing, 0, duck egg. Now 3 kills to 2 up. This does feel like a European style of game where you have a low kill count. It's been sort of back and forth, very few fights in between. It's been all on the farm. The Stygia Beacon has finally been captured, and that means the Titans are going to be unleashed down the mid lane.
Now, the binds of Tartarus have now been removed from the Titans, as we can start to see them get their siege here, at least in just a few moments. But, I mean, even talking about the lead that the Sages have, we're looking at nearly 5,000 gold up for the Sages going into that fight. They get a Fury, which is great, then they lose 3, Fire, Pyromancer, and now the game is not only dead even, but Hex Mambo now leading the charge as they push up mid.
And it's just waiting and waiting until the Titans have finally been unleashed. It should be any second now that they start making their way down that mid lane. But instead, just pushing them up themselves, looking to try and take a tier 2, clear the path to the Phoenix for the Titan to just stroll up. And there we go, they have been unleashed. Jangaru over on the left-hand side having to contest with Dzoni, who's looking for a split push.
Privative being slowly poked away by both Hawkk and Spudio. Those ranged autos, those potion tosses by Hawkk, starting to wear away at Privative's HP, though has some sustain between him and Nayhoo to keep alive. Now as the first Titan starts to run its way through, at least the zone of the Tier 1 tower, Hex Mambo able to clear this one out pretty easily for themselves. A nice range allows them to deal with this Titan, and now they can even start their push-up once their Titan joins them.
And there we go, Chaos Titan has been driven back into the base, clearing the path for the other Titan to walk up this mid lane. And when it pushes into this tier 2, that's where you're going to see the engage come out from either Cozyx, Julio, or Hawkk. Those 3 just look out for, but it's looking to be Privative going on the AH first.
Cozyx in danger, can't even swing away, just barely gets away, but he dies to the poison of Jangaru. 1 kill now for the Sages. Nayhoo ult just off the mark. The Titan still swinging away at the tower, while the Sages try and repel Hex Mambo. Mambo have not given up just yet. Tier 2 tower will be at the bare minimum their prize for losing out on their support.
And that's it, that's it. That's the push over. They're going to back off, and they're going to say, fine, you got us there. Cozyx stepped up a little bit too far. Needs to play a little bit more passive, needs to be a little bit more safe. Could potentially look to go into a Magi's Blessing to avoid that sort of scenario happening in the future, but it's going to be instead the potential start of a Relic Dagger.
Yeah, I want to see if he does get this Relic Dagger, which of the glyphs he goes into. A couple new ones that have up there, the reduced attack speed or the extra protections whenever you do use one of those relics. And more often, at least from the games that I've been playing, when those supports have gotten it, especially if they've gotten Sunder, you go for those extra prots anytime you pop one of those relics.
Yeah, I think it has to be that one. You're not too worried about Renjaru's attack speed, considering he doesn't really have an attack speed stim. And he's the only one who has attack speed that you're really worried about, if at all. So almost certainly going to be the one that gives him some extra protections. And that will help him survive scenarios like that. If he gets pulled in, immediately pops the Cursed Ankh, and then he has more protections. A bit more tanky, a bit more survivable.
Athenian Sages, Snaddy, down to half HP, forced to use the beads away, and a lot of that poke coming from Dzoni. He has just been snaking around the sides of these fights, weaseling his way through the jungle to get those pokes, and setting up for Hex Mambo. Taking Oni Fury for themselves. No contest here by the Sages. They've been driven back, and it's all Hex Mambo coming up big for them in these last few minutes.
And as if Loki wasn't annoying enough, he's got the Shadow Drinker available to him now, so he's going invisible, he gets a kill, he goes invisible again, then reapplies an invisibility to then move faster again because of his one. He is just running around these fights. The second he gets a kill, completely invisible to the rest of the team.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a nuisance to deal with. But now for Athenian Sages, you had your defense under the Tier 2 tower, you're able to find the pick onto Cozyx, but now we start moving over to potential Fire Giant territory here for the Sages. How does their fight inside of the jungle look? I mean, we saw what happened on their retreat just earlier, but how does it look for them whenever they stand their ground against Hex Mambo?
It comes down to how good of engage do they get from Snaddy and Privative. If Sylvanus ultimate or if the Anvil of Dawn come out and they're good, the fight from Athenian Sages can win almost instantly, especially with Nayhoo on that follow-up with that Searing Pain. If, however, Privative and Snaddy are caught out defensively and have to use their ultimates defensively and reactively, Hex Mambo just walk through these fights.
Will be a Pyromancer for Hex Mambo, putting a Runic Bomb in their pockets for the next Fire Giant. 2 of them, matter of fact, standing there. So the couple of structures still available. Could see him used on the birds. We saw that used very commonly in the last few sets so far today. Could see has potential to maybe try and steal away a fire or secure it for themselves. As you mentioned earlier, 1 Runic Bomb, and even having just Nayhoo on there with that ultimate, probably the best secure on the map, at least for the Sages side.
Yeah, I think it's the best secure on the map, period, right now, because just of how much pure damage that ultimate does in a single tick, versus the overall damage over time you will get from Hawkk's Home Sweet Home, or those potion drops that he does eventually drop a couple of them in the fight. But Fire Giant has been started. It is the enhanced version, so this is something that the Athenian Sages definitely do not want to give over for free.
Johnny versus Jangaru. Jump away by Jangaru with Privative standing by. Maybe he has to give it the fight, but Jangaru split himself away from the team. This could be a death on the Serqet. Quick dash out, but now Johnny is here. Stun on top. Hex Mambo take the 1-for-1 trade because now Johnny is gone. It's both junglers out, but Privative is low. And Spudio is going to make sure to deal the final auto. Hex Mambo come up with 2. Snaddy, though, trying to fight back through as Hawkk makes it 3. Snaddy in the middle of 4. That's going to be 4. Hex Mambo come up big in the fight.
Oh, and they're not looking for the Fire Giant here. They're looking to try and end. They're going for this tier 2 tower on the right-hand side, push straight into the Phoenix. It's all Nayhoo up, and I don't think Ra has a snowball's chance of stopping this one. Julio and the rest of Hex Mambo pushing in off the back of Johnny's engage on Jangaru.
Phoenix down to half, just Nayhoo. No ultimate just yet, but one of the faster cooldowns in the game to come back through. Spudio gets tagged, and the Titan has been started up. Nayhoo throws out the snipe, but only his Cozyx. Nayhoo, stunned out by Cozyx, beads immediately away and forced under the fountain in one fell swoop. The Hex Mambo have taken game number 1, and North America loses out in this first one.
It's 5-0 right now between EU and North America. It has a danger of becoming a 6-0 sweep here as Hex Mambo take that game. It wasn't clean. Athenian Sages did look comfortable, I think, for large portions of that game. It all just turned around, though, when Johnny started to hit that level 20 and started becoming a nuisance in these fights rather than a spectator just passively farming in the background.
Yeah, because this was not a game that was in Hex Mambo's control to start this up all the way until, I believe it was that second beacon spawn. This is Athenian Sages, a 500 to start with no kills. First one brings them up to that 1,000, 1,500 threshold, and that slow crawl up to a nearly 5,000. But it really feels like that one fight around the Furies with that breakout moment for Hex Mambo.
Yeah, it felt like the second Johnny was able to maneuver around fights and survive and just start to dip in, dip out like a Loki would like to do, that's when the fight started to turn, when Jangaru wasn't able to just go in and be unkillable, untouchable under the Serqet. That's when the tide started to turn.
Well, it's been nothing but 2-0 so far today, and Hex Mambo now 1 game away from keeping up the sweeps. Can they do it in Game 2, or are we going to be going to a Game 3? It all comes down to start up Game 2 right after this break.
She got cheats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when a baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business out my mind. Have a treetop, swinging my visa, put up a cool. With the party, sipping her coffee, epic up. With a clear eye, she too weird, I like a tattoo. Then it funny, but I wonder, hey, how many times can you say no winning and true? How low can you go to keep ducking your one baby boo? I wanted some land, I wanted some nigga move. But you on the train and I want this going choo-choo. She got cheats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when a baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business out my mind. time, leaning like in pizza. Put them knees down, squeeze it like a breeze on. Got the teeth done, had to fill the crease up. Saw the sneakers by the door and realized it was time to go. Weighted blankets couldn't come for me. I'll need more to ever catch a seat. I keep wondering what I didn't see. She a damn good thief. She got treats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys, when the baby out of town. Got sheets, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business on my mind. I get a chance to make amends. After the dance, I switch my lens to try and glance how it makes sense. I play pretend this is the end. I get a chance to make amends. After the dance, I switch my lens to try and make amends. She got cheats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when the baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, money business on my mind.
And EU strikes again. Looks like NA might have a little gas in the tank here in game number one. But the EU region, they stand strong. Hex Mambo grab a win here in game number one. I talked earlier about the Tier 5 event bundle that's going on and how it's at its cheapest point. You know about the V Shoujo event. That's been going on for a little while. And if you missed out on the cheapest portion of the bundle, which was week 1 through 4, have no fear. because for week 5 and week 6, it's still discounted from what it will be in the future. Right now, you can buy them direct or buy the entire bundle for about a 70% discount. So for the next 2 weeks, the V Shoujo event bundle discounted from what it will be in a couple weeks, and then after that, it'll be a little less discounted than it is. So if you want the V Shoujo bundle, still a great time to get in there and grab it for yourself. NA, they need to grab the bundle. They need to grab some boosters or something here, Gore, because my goodness, EU, they've come to play yet again.
Yeah.
You and I said, you joked about if it's a 2-kill game at 20 minutes. I very confidently said that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It hasn't been happening at all today. Literally was a 2-kill game at 20 minutes. Spot on. And it was a Sage's 2 kills.
Yep. If that was like a Sage's 6 kills,
Yeah.
we might be talking about a different game. I don't know. Their composition seemed like it wanted to
ahead.
fight, seemed like it should have been able to do a lot more. Like you said, they were ahead,
5K?
3,000 gold, 5,000 gold. They were able to play the map really well, play their draft well, but they didn't get enough pressure on map and to end the game as quick as this draft wanted. And it's not even as much as their draft wanted it to end fast, as much as it is they needed to stop it before Hex Mambo could get a grip on the ball. And unfortunately for them, you've got a Guan Yu, you've got a Baba Yaga, a Maui, a Hachi on the other side, and normally I wouldn't throw Loki into the same list as those others, but when it's Johnny playing Loki and you're letting him get that far into the game, things are going to start to slip through your fingers. I think that they had a good approach in terms of I guess some of their pressure. It's just applying a little more, trying to turn it into something else. It was a very difficult comp to try and make that work. There's a lot of survivability on Hex Mambo. I mean, every single one of those gods has something that gets them away from you, and not a lot of chase down on the Sages. So if your CC isn't immediately there, and depending on whether or not Serqet's there, Thor's there, that might just be the end of the fight, right? You just say, hey, well, now you're 30 feet further away from me, and I can't do anything about it. So that's just going to fizzle out. And I feel like they had we talked about it, like the CC was there. I think their fight potential was there. But I wanted sub-level 5 fights. I wanted pressure. I wanted ganks constantly. I wanted Thor making massive rotations. We got a little bit in the right direction, but not enough that they were able to take a win.
And for the smaller-minded folks like me,
Yeah.
I'm looking at damage numbers at the end of that game. Both of the carries on the Sages doubled up on damage by their counterparts on the Hex Mambo side. Really good game from Hawkk. Really good game from Spudio. Both of those two with 20,000 damage to just the 10,000 of Nayhoo and Renjaru there in game number 1. So the Sages, they fall in game 1. But a chance to fight back here in game number 2. And so Gore, Hex Mambo, they find themselves in the first pick spot. We've seen a heavy support focus in our bans here today. And it looks like that's going to continue here. Mindset remains similar. Privative, a difficult support player to ban out, though. Goes to something like the Sylvanus, feels just fine with it. Another ROM ban. Because this, in the Sages, okay, they ban out the Baba Yaga this time. I wonder if you're going to try to put Renjaru onto something a bit different. The Hachiman has been first picked a lot today. And it will be first picked once more. And maybe that's why you ban out the ROM and leave the Baba Yaga open as well. It's telling the Sages, ban out one or the other because we're going to get whichever one you leave open.
Yeah, and honestly, with what you had just said and pointed out, I mean, you played the Hachi last game, and you double up your opponent's damage numbers, you're going to look really solid. It wasn't on her, though. I think there were plenty of options, not even opportunities, options above that had looked really solid. We had actually even talked about it. I had mentioned the fact that Thor was flexible at that time, but we had talked a lot about the fact that he's been doing a lot better in the jungle as of late.
Point.
I am much more in love with this as a top 2 than I was the Thor Anhur. I feel like Anhur, it just creates a very different conversation because all of a sudden you're in you didn't need to pick that right here. Probably didn't need to pick it at all in your top 3 because who's banning Anhur right now? Literally nobody else had, at least in my mind, nobody else was thinking about that. I was thinking at least 3 different carries before he would have even had a chance to get onto that list. And now you get Thor, still some flexibility, can go solo, can go over towards the jungle. We've seen him pretty successful in the jungle lately, wouldn't mind seeing him. Semi-global presence always feels really good. I love Discordia because you get what we have seen kind of highlight outside of maybe Merlin, the next highest behind a Baba Yaga. Brings different things than a Merlin's going to bring, a little more burst. I like CC from Discordia a little bit better. Strife is one of my favorite abilities in the game. The apple, when it bounces appropriately, is able to help you out. When it bounces inappropriately, it just walks, I guess, the other way, right? You don't get to see any connection. Tier, I don't know, man. I think that Hex Mambo are kind of getting away with a lot of things that, in an ideal world, you're not letting them have. And it feels like a team that has, they just have their draft, their play style on lock. And if that means that, like last game, that they just have to handle you for a little bit and do their best to not fall super far behind and then fight back. I mean, 5,000 gold, if you're hitting that at 10 minutes, that's a giant red flag for whoever's down. But 20 minutes in, 23 minutes in, 5,000 gold, you can start to chip away at that and at least take the fight. It's going to be a little more awkward than maybe an even fight, but it's still going to give you some opportunities. I like what the Sages have done with this in their top 3. At the minimum, they've at least pulled back more goodwill in their draft, right? There's not a Sylvanus. There's not an Anhur. There's not these question marks of, can you make it work? It's, these have worked in the past. These should still work now.
You still prefer to not have to fight against a 5,000 gold lead.
Yeah,
but
in an ideal world.
But Hex Mambo can. Storied things between Hex Mambo, a tier, and a Masters event. Unfortunately for Hex Mambo, Deathwalker sitting by in the coach's chair this time. Fortunately, is you've got Julio playing the tier, who's also a pretty darn good tier player as well.
Yeah.
Similar opportunities. Sages following a similar mindset with their first game bans in the second wave. They're going to take away Kali Kwang once again. It's going to leave Dzoni open to something a bit different out of his jungle pick. And Hex Mambo is so unconcerned about the jungle pick, they're going to ban the Serqet as well. And so, a ban against Dzoni, who still needs a pick. You could say the same for the Sages, though, who ban Kali and Kwang. However, could be a Thor in the jungle, so they might not be taking shots at a pick that they still need. Interesting game of chess.
I could hear Dzoni just saying, yeah, give me Loki again.
Yeah, right.
Like,
why not? Because it was a quiet game. I mean, went, what, 2-1?
Yeah,
so
it wasn't anything crazy.
He didn't lose the game. Might not have won the game, but he didn't lose the game.
But the one thing I think that his Loki can provide is it's a wild card. And in the past, like, this isn't a Loki meta. In fact, I don't think I've seen him play Loki in a meta where Loki's actually that great. He picks it up and typically makes it look good regardless of what's going on around him. I think that it still gives him some kill pressure. Probably not where they're going. I mean, tier list-wise, there's a reason you're not seeing anybody else pick it up. So I wouldn't be upset with them maybe falling a little further behind on that pick. Also, I'm not going to be upset if they lock it in. I mean, you've got a Hachi tier Merlin, right? You've got a very, very solid top 3. And so you can wiggle a little more comfort in the end. You're not, I mean, even with the Guardian bans we've seen, not scraping the bottom of the barrel. The thing that surprised me, especially with Sylvanus locked in, the lack of mage supports that we've seen, despite the fact that mage supports have been very popular over the last couple of weeks. And granted, changes have happened, right? This patch has been relatively big. Just interesting. I think even earlier today we were still seeing some Nox getting banned, and it doesn't seem to be on the radar for either of these teams.
Yeah, good point. We've seen Nox bans prioritized against other teams. Hex Mambo, they like the way the Maui went in game number 1. You're going to ban out the Kali. There's a god that can do a lot of similar things. That's a Bakasura. And that's what Hex Mambo's jungler Dzoni will be playing in game number 2. It's Bakasura Gore. It's a god that can be answered. However, you give it enough time to wind up, and it's shredding your team later in the game.
Yeah.
There's good setup for it. Potential good peel for it. And we know Dzoni likes to operate kind of on solo missions, and it's that style of pick that can make things look good. And that's what I'm talking about with bans. It's like you're going to ban the Kali, you're going to ban the Kwang. Dzoni's going to end up with a similar potential pick nonetheless.
Not only that, one of the things that Bakasura maybe suffers from on his own, like, it depends on what relics he can pull, right? And he can typically outlast. I'm stealing this from Mifflin earlier, by the way. Outlast things like the Aegis. But beads is a huge issue for him. But when you look at this team comp, all of a sudden you've got a Maui, you've got a tier. Like, beads are not going to be as much of an issue. At least where you're hanging out, you're going to be able to find a little bit more. Maybe in mid, you're going to suffer a little bit less, but I think Baka is going to be able to, deal with people on the Sages who are going to have very low survivability. Luckily, Discordia, does have technically something to create a little bit of distance and some good self-peel and CC on her own, but is it enough is going to be a huge question. Sylvanus has some peel that he's going to bring, but self-peel, it is not really. And then, of course, when you start to throw in maybe like Kernanos has a dash, Thor, teleport, Daji, very contingent dash, but a dash nonetheless. So ways to disengage for the Sages that might help them out. Still a little, I'm just going to call it wonky, right? Not quite the draft that you are looking at and thinking that's going to be able to win this game easily. Especially when you look at what Hex Mambo have been able to lock in. You've got 4 out of 5 of these that are in the top 2, top 3 conversation for their role. And Maui, who I think deserves to be in that spot if you're being played by the right hands, and based on last game and the reason they're running it back, I think Hex Mambo have the right hands. I really like what the left side's doing with their drafts.
Yep.
The Sages are putting a lot of execution threshold on themselves.
A lot of this going to live and die with the Daji. You imagine, Gore, it's the type of pick that commands respect. However, if it's played around properly, it can be a bit quiet. Daji, the powwow, the ability to pull in targets, sets up for the rest of the team. Daji can be a snowball style of pick. There are a few players at the SPL level that are simply not allowed to get the Daji just because of how game-wrecking of a pick that can truly be. So there could be answers here for Hex Mambo. We set the stage plenty over the course of Season 10 so far. It's the junglers who really get things going. Daji versus Bakasura, though, Gore, it's not a battle that we've seen too often. It's a battle I'm excited to look at, though.
And it's one that I'm a little worried about. I'm excited for it for the same reason, especially if you can make it a late game. If we go to 40 minutes or something like that, then I just want to drop those 2 in the jungle, let them 1v1. Daji should come up on top of that, but sometimes it's a coin flip. It really is, though, I think the early pressure that is going to make a big difference. I think Bakasura can farm not only incredibly quickly, but he can get pressure on map very quick. And so all of a sudden that can translate into team fights. You're talking about someone who's going to be able to pretty easily lock down a majority of the Sages. So good rotations from a Bakasura, from Dzoni, I think can make a huge difference here. Daji on the other side, normally, especially if you're locking in a Daji this late, either you're really good at her or there's a lack of CC immunity. There's still some CC immunity on the other side. It's contingent. We'll just have to see if they can make it work.
Gore, the question is, does EU clean sweep day number 1? Does NA at least get us to Game 3? We'll find out in Game 2.
Yeah, we'll see if North America, specifically the Athenian Sages, can find a single game win at least for North America to start out day number 1 of the Masters event. It's J-Mac, Alpha Jackal, and Doug back in game number 2 and our third NA versus EU matchup of the day. But it seems that the fans at home, at least, swing a little bit more towards Hex Mambo, a 75-25 split for the EU team, thinking they're going to clean sweep this one out, AJ.
And I'm privy to agree with them, but I think Jangaru on the Daji is throwing a little bit of a wrench in these works that's not making this as clear-cut as everything should be. It's not a pick that we see often, but every time we do see it, it has some impact.
Yeah, we will have to see how Jangaru can utilize either burning beads or being able to take some of those burnt beads, whether it be from Snaddy taking those ones away, maybe Privative able to pluck a couple of those ones away from the side of Hex Mambo. And Hex Mambo feels like their composition is going to work very similar to what we saw last game. Dzoni kind of playing real quiet for the first 15, 20 or so minutes of the game. And then just out of nowhere, it feels like a massive explosion for Dzoni and his squad.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, as you said, pretty much their game plan as it was in game number 1. And if it works out, no need to fix it, no need to change it, because it worked. And it's on the Athenian Sages to go, right, we need to change this. This is what's being different in this game, to be able to make sure that something goes their way.
Privative going to keep Spudio busy, keep him from getting to lane a little bit faster. Let's find some damage, but Cozyx can now walk up with Renjaru and easily stack up that wave for Spudio on the Hachiman and continue to get aggressive. Dual lane was where the action all kicked off for the Sages in game number 1. It's where it's kicking off for Mambo. here in game number 2. Beats already taken away from Renjaru.
This is not how I expected this lane to go. When you line up a Sylvanus and a Kurnanos in lane, you're thinking, right, we're going to have the pressure. We're going to be the ones to force beats early. But Renjaru forced to play defensively early on. The Sylvanus obviously not getting access to those whips until level 3 with the abilities that he has chosen in this early game with the root and the pull. So not be able to get wave pressure until that point.
A little bit of battling in mid as well. Let's put Johnny down. Considerably
whoa.
HP. Jump in stun finds 2. A pull back is good. One more shot to Renjaru. He needs it, but a good body block by Priv keeps him alive. Spudio nearly able to close out that kill, but just out of range from being able to do so. Great body blocks by Priv to keep his duo alive.
I think this secondary pull from Cozyx actually messed up Spudio's auto attack there to get him out, so it could have happened. It looked like it happened, but either way, I think the body blocks from Privative are going to be A-okay to get him out. Jangaru forced to retreat, go back to base early on. That is a horrific feeling as an ADC, but at least you didn't die.
Didn't die. Old pull on a Cozyx under tower. Able to swing away, but down to about a quarter HP himself. Cozyx might not be able to stick around this lane too much longer, especially if one of these junglers wants to try and get active. But it does seem that Johnny and Jangaru not interested in the left side of the map. They're going to let the duo lane be the duo lane, not going to bring a third member over.
No, they're going to wait until they have some items online. Johnny going to be waiting until he has 2, maybe 3 items, depending on his build order. For Jangaru, as a Daji, you cannot hope to fight in the early game. You need to have some items online to be able to do a fair bit of damage. Don't get me wrong, you are still threatening. You will still destroy somebody in a 1v1 if they're not careful. But these are tenured, almost SPL level players that you are facing. I know that they are CC, but they're playing like they are from the SPL, especially Julio and Johnny, who have had tastes of that sort of arena before.
They've been up there for at least a bit. Blue buff invade by Johnny, and this is pretty much just the standard if you're playing a Bakasura. As soon as you know those cooldowns, you immediately jump in towards those buffs. Although in response, Julio is going to lose out on his, so it's just a blue for blue trade between the junglers. Neither solo lane are going to get their own buff, and I'm not sure they're even really in a position to walk to try and pick up the enemy once they're invaded. But Johnny's going to go the extra mile. Not just a blue, but a red buff stolen as well.
No, I love the counter invade coming out from Jangaru, though. Not afraid to step into the Bakasura's territory, where in this early game we'll probably lose off on that trade. Instead, going in there, just taking away some farm, just doing what he can to keep himself even or slightly ahead of the Bakasura, which is exactly where you want to be.
Spudio pulled in, but not threatened by Privative. Stands his ground, holds on to his beads, and the shield buff picked up for the Hex Mambo dual lane. And this is where we saw at least the early control for the Sages start out. It's where we saw most of the early lead come from in the goal were these shield buff fights.
Oh.
But Snaddy now forced to the sky. Julio getting the better end of the trade in lane. Maybe that just comes to having that blue stone, having that extra bit of burst damage on this tier.
Yeah, and I think Snaddy is going to go back to base, finish off on his first item, which should be the Soul Eater. Indeed, he does. Manages to buy that outright, so he was back in the base anyway. He doesn't care that he falls down low. Maybe cares that he loses an ultimate, and Johnny low already. Going to be forced to use his ultimate? Yes, he has to. Great play by Jangaru.
Fast ult there by Johnny to get out as well. Needed it because did not have beads to get out in his own regard. So trade out of the ults between the two junglers, but beads at least removed from Jangaru a little bit earlier on. Means that maybe Johnny can try and get active, get one of these players to get offensive up to the jungle. Ult for ult trade by support. We saw this a couple of times last game. Cozyx unable to pull Priv under tower.
Yeah, that is the tale of the supports. They will trade basic attacks in the jungle. They'll say a quick hello whilst doing so. They'll trade ultimates when they need to, but they know that they're not going to kill each other. They're not going to put each other under threat.
Yeah, Cozyx going to swing back into tower and rejoin Spudio to clear out the wave, while Johnny's going to continue his aggression onto the enemy side of the jungle. Still standing by. Blue buff up in just a little bit. I imagine this is where we'll see the junglers plant themselves for their next potential fight. At least for the Athenian Sages. Losing out on their buff last time, able to steal it away with Jangaru to make it a 1-1 trade, but Johnny stuck around. Jangaru has not. This could just be 2 buffs for Hex Mambo.
I think it might very well be as well, because he's got that Golden Blade. We're able to clear this out very easily, especially with that 8 minion, and the fact that Julio has pressure over in that solo lane. They're going to jump into the buff now, but Loki has managed to come back just in time as Jangaru. Snaddy could be on the chopping block instead.
Snaddy able to teleport out. Johnny over the wall, just shy of stealing away the blue buff. So Hex Mambo unable to get the invade, but also missing out just barely on potential pick towards Snaddy. Had Johnny had ultimate, I think we might have seen a kill over there.
Oh yeah, 100%. He either forces Snaddy to ult, or he gets the kill himself. No chance of getting the blue buff invade, but at least he managed to pick up the first blood for his team.
Yeah. He's able to get blue for his team on their side of the map, and can now rotate over to deal with these mid-heartbeat camps. And I imagine the Johnny Power Farm will probably be the name of the game here.
Oh yeah.
In game number 2. It really seemed to kind of be at least the mentality for Hex Mambo in game number 1. Let Johnny free farm, get 3-4 items online, and let this Loki be Loki. Yeah, I imagine it's probably a lot of the same for the Baka.
With Hex Mambo, there seems to be 2 distinct play styles which they play with. The ones that we're seeing for this game and the last game in this set against Athenian Sages has been the we will power farm until we feel comfortable enough to fight. The other side that we have seen them play is, oh, we've got more power than you in the first 5 minutes. We're just going to run you down in lanes because we don't care. We are Hex Mambo and we are big. We are massive. That is exactly what Hex Mambo would like to do, but they will also go to this playstyle if the time calls for it.
Yeah, it's not really much of a gray area for Hex Mambo. It's a lot of black and white for their play style.
Ult for ult.
Another ult for ult by the supports, just to make sure that Priv doesn't get pulled out of position, and that's pretty much the only use that we have seen so far from Priv's ult this game has just been to immune Cozyx ult.
Yeah, I think he needed to do that because of the rotation coming out from Johnny. If he gets pulled in there, Johnny definitely is able to just waltz in and get a free kill. Going to be caught out by a ward is Johnny, so he's going to be wasting his time over here on this left-hand side. Has to vacate the premises sooner rather than later, but we'll make sure his team secures this shield buff at the very least.
Julio doing a good job of keeping Snaddy at bay on the right side of the map. Opted for defense. So far has the tier. Julio making sure to get that Blessed Parade of regrowth, and now starting up the Gold Fury. Power that Merlin is you got a lot of shred on these early objectives. Can Priv steal this one away? No, he's just too late. Hex Mambo on the board with the first Fury, only 7.5 minutes in.
Yeah, and look at what it's done to the gold. It's put them about 1,500 gold in the lead. The experience difference looking identical, if not the graphs, the numbers do look the same. And that is a stark difference from what we saw in game number 1. The Athenian Sages were the ones that were running away with it in terms of the gold. The experience was level, somehow, throughout most of the game. But now Hex Mambo, they're taking the first real leads that they have done in this game.
I mean, last time it was 20, 25 minutes where we saw Hex Mambo really try and play proactively on the map, try and get anything going. Now, it's here from just the first couple of minutes. This first blue buff. Well, now the third blue buff now. For Snaddy, he'll be able to secure his own with just the double tap of the hammer. Maybe eat minion just a slight bit off cooldown and didn't expect the damage. Could be seeing a brawl, though, as 3 of the Athenian Sages have rotated over. Mid laner on the way, Snaddy up in the sky. Julio being chased out. Use the ult to get away, but he's going to get pulled right back in by the Pal now. Jangaru strikes first blood for the Athenian Sage, and now Johnny is trying to pick it a fight, and he's winning this fight. Goes in with the ultimate, gets a lot of damage on Jangaru and the Snaddy. Jangaru walks back, and it's a 1-for-1 trade, but now Nayhoo rolling as fast as he can, but it's Hawkk doing all the damage. The golden apple's not enough damage. It's 2 for Mambo.
Privative, one more thing should do it, and he picks it up with the ultimate, but Privative on low himself. The Sunder comes out, but Snaddy's still around the corner, and that's going to cause the retreat from Cozyx and Johnny. The ADC's having the time of their life, just being completely left alone here as all the action's over in the dual lane.
Yeah, Solo Island has now moved over to the opposite end of the map. A 2-for-2 trade on the right-hand side. That's about a 500 gold over towards the Athenian Sages in favor, but experience keeping even at that point through. First blood for Jangaru. You feel like it's probably the most important one that comes out there for the Sages in that fight.
Oh yeah, gets the first blood as well, which is massive for him as well, don't get me wrong. But unfortunately does fall, so Johnny collects that slight extra bounty for the fact that he did kill somebody who had a kill on them already. So overall, Johnny does come up on top of that whole engage, I would say. But Jangaru, at least he got the kill to keep himself up in pace of this Bakasura, which is a very difficult thing to do when he's got that Golden Blade online.
And now the fight is finally dispelled, and you can see that surge disappear on the right-hand side, because a nice little extra bit of gold. Should any of the solo laners stick around to try and take those out, but this early in the game, still fairly tanky on those surges. Probably not going to get too many chances to utilize those, but man, damage from Snaddy. You can already see what he's able to do up against Julio, even with double defense by Julio. Not quite enough to survive some of the poke from Snaddy.
No, it's pretty much the opposite of what we've seen throughout the earlier stages of this laning phase, where Julio was sort of the dominant person in this lane. But now, Snaddy, he's got that sustain online thanks to that Soul Eater, and as well as that Warrior's Axe. He's A-okay to be taking this poke out from Julio and then dish it back tenfold.
And Julio just trying to now survive the the lead that's been given over to Snaddy to start this one. How do is all Julio had about a level up over his opposition. Now sitting even, if not maybe even just slightly behind his opponent through. Actually uses the ultimate to steal away blue. Well, he able to fearless out. Jangaru going to go through, but Johnny is now shown back up. It's a 2-for-2 battle once more. Pull in on top of Julio, but not a lot of damage thrown back his way. Johnny's got ult, but not willing to use it. Instead, it's a brawl on the left side of the map. Double ultimates from the Sages to keep things going. It's action on all fronts. Now a dive in by Johnny. One more swipe, not enough. Jangaru able to get away just in time. No bloodshed on the right side of the map, but darn near close as the Athenian Sages both to force.
Oh, whoa!
Johnny! He blinks through the tower, picks up the kill, and now Snaddy is stuck between a rock and a hard place.
No,
That's
what have you
Johnny
done?
and Julio, a push through the tower, a couple more swipes, and it's a double for Johnny.
He throws the hammer, consigned in defeat, knows what's coming for him, and he falls down. There's another 2 kills picked up. The Stygian beacon is opening up soon. Nayhoo was forced to go back to base as well, by the way, as Hawkk fights yet another fantastic fight in that mid lane. Hex Mambo are showing up in game number 2 here, and Athenian Sages, they need an answer. They need an answer now.
Yeah, Mambo last game didn't want to do anything. Now they got Johnny on this Bakasura, a couple of kills to his name, and already up 3-0. A much more active early game for Hex Mambo, and that's at the nearly 3,000 gold up here at 12 minutes. With a beacon spawning in and 3 members of Mambo, it seems this first one's going their way.
Yeah, absolutely no contest coming out here from the Athenian Sages as they're backing off. They are trying to regroup mentally, I would say, at this point. Because you've had a fantastic opportunity in game number 1, and you lost it because of a 27-minute fight where the opposition team got their first kills. Now you're finding yourselves behind in game number 2, which could send you down to the lower bracket of this tournament. It's difficult. You've come in here as the first seed of NA, and you're going up against a team which, admittedly, has the potential to be first seed of EU, but find themselves as second seed because of some mishaps with their playstyle and mishaps with some seeding and some, well, tiebreaker scenarios.
Right.
Well, the Athenian Sages, they're ruining those now.
Yeah, now Athenian Sages got to try and find their fight back. A pick on a Spudio would be great, but Privative just not fast enough to get back there. Cozyx shows up. Bubble is available for Priv, so he should be fine, even should this hook connect. He'll miss out on the pull, though.
Oh.
Spudio does eat a little bit of damage there. Johnny on the left side of the map's all setting up. Primal Fury is available should Hex Mambo decide to go that route. And with the group up that they have, could be the next opportunity for a fight.
Yeah, Cozyx pushing himself very aggressively. And this is the time you do want to fight, because look at the level disparity in the junglers, especially. 4 levels up for Johnny at this point. And he is over here trying to put as much pressure as he put in the solo lane over onto this duo side now, because, well, there's nothing more he can do for Julio over on that side of the map. It's at the point now where you don't really kill the opposition solo laner. So what do you do instead? You kill an objective. You kill the Primal Fury, or at least force the fights around it.
Up around though, Renjaru, Privative, they're on the way. Primal Fury low, Hex Mambo getting the apple just off the mark. A lot of damage thrown out by Nayhoo, but with the ultimate just missing out, it will be another Fury over for Hex Mambo this time through. Primal Fury under their belt and a nice little extra pocket of gold. 4K up now for Hex Mambo.
Yeah, it's not looking great. The thing they need to look out for is that 8,000 experience difference more than it needs to look out for the gold. That is humongous for a 14-minute lead that they have. That's double the gold lead, and it looks to be across the entire board. Not one player is level for the Athenian Sages on the side of Hex Mambo. I think some levels are 2 levels up. There's even a 3-level disparity to point it out in the jungle. The closest is Snaddy onto Julio.
Oh no, Johnny doesn't get hit by the stun on Snaddy. That will get the Thor up to the sky. Forces Snaddy out of this team fight. Now sets up for Hex Mambo around the Pyromancer. Athenian Sages have been on the defensive for almost this entire game. I mean, from minute 1, Renjaru forced out of his beads in dual lane, lose that pressure there. Now Julio sneaking around the backside, trying to get the bubble away from Privative, will do so, and is trying to zone 3 players out. So that way Hex Mambo can just lackadaisically take this Pyro, but Snaddy showing up will keep Hex Mambo away.
Yeah, they're just going to drop that Pyromancer, walk away, not entirely comfortable taking that fight, despite the fact that they have almost everything going for them on their side. The one thing that they're waiting for, though, will be the landfall from Cozyx. That's just come back up off cooldown. So if they find themselves in a very similar scenario, I think they take that fight instead.
You ever played I Spy? You know, it's a game where you call out like distinguishing like colors or features. You can try and guess what it is.
Yeah, okay, I'm down.
I spy a shield on a man in a red hood. Can you figure out what I'm pointing towards?
A man in a hood. Well, Hachiman hasn't built any shields, so it can't be him.
No.
No. Maui doesn't really have a hood. I mean,
No,
Snaddy's skin does have a hood and he has Glad Shield, but I don't think that's what you're pointing out.
No. Specifically, I'm looking more towards this Bakasura.
Yeah.
Failing's third slot seems a little odd for a Bakasura build.
I mean, it gives you what you want. You have some physical protection, some health, so you're a bit more difficult to kill. Plus, you gain some attack speed. Who doesn't love attack speed as Bakasura?
Well, why not just attack speed? Let's throw a Pyromancer in there as well.
Stolen.
Does get stolen away by just Nayhoo's damage alone. It'll be Pyro for the Chaos side team. In a couple minutes now till the beacon is back online. Hex Mambo lose out on one objective, but maybe try and start a fight on another front. Dzoni walking up towards Renjaru, level 17 on the Bakasura,
They can't fight him.
surpassing that level a minute.
No, they can't fight him. Even with all three of them there, level 13, 13, 14, Dzoni gets a triple kill. He will just triple kill them.
Jangaru goes in, tries to fight Hawkk. Will be able to get the Aegis and the beads away from the Merlin. A quick retreat out, but Spudio goes in on top of the horse, immediately striked out. Cozyx tries to get the pull, does get the bubble from Priv, and a heal goes through. Dzoni wants to keep this fight going, but may just pull back. Still a minute till Fury's back up.
Yeah, they're going to try and jostle for position for that. Maybe a jostle for position for the Stygian Beacon. Beats are forced down. He has to dash away yet again.
Bluestone, not quite enough. He actually hit the buff. The buff is chasing Jangaru all the way to the Phoenix. He's able to get away just by the help of the movement speed, but Privative wishes that he had that level of speed to get away. Hex Mambo are just rolling through the map.
Athenian Sages have no answer for it as well. Their one saving grace could be over here on the dual lane. Renjaru versus Spudio. It's not a total lost cause at this point, but it is something they need to try and focus on. Get Renjaru involved. Get your Hunter involved. It's one of the more important positions in this meta to get ahead and make sure they're safe and comfortable. Do so. Put something over on this duo side to put Spudio under some pressure, because he's been completely left alone.
Yeah, it feels that ever since the duo kind of went awry at the beginning of the game, no junglers really put some pressure. Aside from Dzoni, he's walked up and he's threatened Renjaru's at least position around this side of the map, but haven't really seen a fight break out at dual lane just yet. Because of that, Spudio now getting to reap the benefits of that pressure. Level 17 up to the 15 of Renjaru, 2-level deficit in a couple of different spots there. I mean, it's 2 between the Hunters, it's 1 for a couple other spots, but the most staggering one, Dzoni, 5 levels up over Jangaru.
He doesn't even get anything if he kills Jangaru at this point.
It's just bragging rights at that point.
Is it bragging rights at that point even? I mean, it's like just taking candy from a baby at that point. Do you even get any sort of plaudits for doing so?
He feels better about it. He knows that he got another kill on his column. He goes from 3 to 4. 4 is a bigger number than 3. I learned that in math at least.
Oh, so number go up makes you happy.
Yes, big number going bigger makes me happy. Unless it's in the death column, then it makes me sad.
Okay,
it's got to be in the kill column.
So you have number on either side go up, make you happy.
Yes.
Number in middle stay the same.
Yes, want that one to stay at a 0 if possible. And Hex Mambo are looking to keep that 0 on the loss column for not just EU, but for themselves today. Already starting out 3-0 in their sets and looking to make it 4. If they can find a win here against the Sages in game number 2. Sages want to find some kind of a win here for North America. This has been a pretty desolate wasteland in the win column for NA, and it's so far looking pretty desolate for objectives as well. Athenian Sages, they're going to try and steal this one away, but the Golden Apple a little bit too early, and Hex Mambo back away from it so they can pick up a Fury for themselves.
Yeah, and Hex Mambo, they want to continue this just to set up that qualification matchup against fellow EU team Niflheim Wargs. Don't forget, the winner of that set, whoever wins this set versus Niflheim Wargs, will qualify for the main bracket against the SPL teams, just depending on whether they're the first seed or second seed. That's what's left to decide at the very end of it all in day 3. But Hex Mambo, they want to make sure that they at least get to that match.
Faster path to the main bracket is the eye, and at least the goal for all of these SCC teams. And their prize will either be the Hounds or the Gladiators to square off against, and then potential to make it up into the quarterfinals should a team win against one of those SPL talents out there. And Hex Mambo, in the past, have been a team to do just that. Them and former Highland Ravens of EU SCC last year able to make a run all the way to World up against some of the SPL and other SCC talent. looking to keep that nice and clean here today in day one.
Yeah, and speaking of Island Ravens, that's a team that will await one of them should they be able to take down their first SPL opposition. And the other side, it's the Oni Warriors. What a surprise. What a lovely reward for you.
Yeah, what a nice prize. You make this nice little standout run through the SCC, maybe get a face-off against the Hounds or the Gladiators, find a win there. You're going to go into either the number 1 or the number 2 seed of the SPL, who've been looking so clean in their last couple of weeks of play, especially the Oni Warriors, looking to continue their undefeated streak. But maybe there could be a team to try and stop that here at Masters. Snaddy, you got 4 chasing you out. One of them is Julio. Cozyx even so far back to try and hold this through. Nowhere to go. Can't get to the sky in time. And 07's in the chat as Hex Mambo gets up their 6th kill.
And goodbye, my friend. Snaddy not cleared for takeoff there, but demolition jobs have been taking place in the mid and left-hand side of the map. Privative, Nayhoo, Jangaru, and Renjaru all over on the left-hand side. And you know what that means? 4 over on left, 0 over on right. Fire Giant looks to be as free as can be.
Such a easy target here for Hex Mambo. Johnny's keeping the entirety of the Sage busy. Johnny's staring him down. He's laughing at him. He doesn't care
Privative.
what the Sages do. He could probably take all 4 if he wants to. Under tower goes Jangaru. Johnny used the ultimate. He wants the fight. He might just go down. Jumps away, gets the beads as well, and pull off the mark. Johnny has been able to sustain the fight against the Sages and might even just go back for another, because look at the rest of the team. The cavalry is arriving. Hex Mambo have arrived on the scene as Johnny takes down 1, defends against 4. Renjaru barely makes it back to base, but now it's Jangaru on the run. Spudio's going to chase him out. Finds the slow through, dashes in as well. Jangaru teleports over the buff, but
Julio.
Look who's awaiting him. It's Julio on the tier. A Lawbringer over the wall to chase out Jangaru, only saved by Snaddy and squad.
He was so close to getting his blink off. It's about 2 seconds away from cooldown before that wall hits. If that was on cooldown, blink, dead Jangaru. That's then a 3 versus 5 on this defense, but instead, it's a 0 versus 5 as just retreating and giving this objective up.
No, it's Julio versus the Sages, keeping 2 of them back while tier 2 tower falls down. No runic bombs in pocket for Mambo, so it's going to take all of their extra effort. Ultimate by Cozyx, pulls back Renjaru, but it's Cozyx out of position, forced to go away. Spudio takes down Renjaru, dunked in by Snaddy to the back line, and he will take out 1, but he can barely get back to the port as Johnny knocks him down. It's now 2 up for Hex Mambo, and Johnny continuing his search back, but the Phoenix is targeting him out. He's able to take it down before it drops him as Hawkk charges forward. Nayhoo's gone, Privative gone. It is 4 down for the Sages. But Hex Mambo, are they healthy enough for the Titan? The answer to that seems to be no.
Too many towers up for them to really be looking at this Titan at this point, but they could do so if they take out this mid lane Phoenix as well. Hex Mambo continue their relentless charge in this game, 11-3, and it's over 10,000 gold deficit that the Athenian Sages is staring down, and it's only going to get wider as Jangaru has to just watch in despair as his mid lane Phoenix falls down.
There's nothing Jangaru can do to stop this one with 4 staring him down. Hex Mambo have now wiped 2 birds off the map and still 2 towers left. Fire Giant buff slowly whittling away. Final consolation prize of this one may just be the neutral objectives. Pyro and Oni Fury available. Johnny on the right side, the rest of the team on left.
You know the only reason Johnny actually survives diving that Phoenix on left? Phalanx.
You know what? Fair enough. The defense keeps him alive. Takes down the Phoenix, and now Hex Mambo with not just Oni, but Pyromancer. Once Johnny drops this one down, a staggering 12,000 gold lead for Hex Mambo in the blink of an eye. Hex Mambo controlled all of the early game and have dominated this late game.
At this point, the Athenian Sages, they have to wait 10 minutes for Hex Mambo to just make mistake after mistake before they can even look to fight back into this.
That's wishful thinking.
It's ludicrous thinking at this point. I mean, when have I ever told you that Hex Mambo have made mistakes for 10 minutes in a row? I've never told you that. I don't think I'll ever say that in this sort of context, unless they change their roster entirely.
Yeah, unless maybe we're talking like the first 10 minutes where they're just kind of like getting rolled. But outside of that, once we hit this point, it's very rare we see Hex Mambo go down against their opposition. 2 towers left up, tier 1 and tier 2 on right. Hex Mambo will make a beeline over towards that side of the map, take those towers, at least tier 1, swiftly. And with Oni minions charging in alongside them, Oni fire minions in mid, and Johnny in the jungle. No one can stand up to this Bakasura.
Just finds Nayhoo, takes him down in what, 5 basic attacks with the with those claws activated. you can't survive that. There is no surviving Johnny fighting with the jungle at this point, no matter who you are.
4 versus 3 at the Phoenixes. Snaddy can't defend. Right side Phoenix goes down. Who cares about fighting even for a fire
Titan's
giant inside up for at least a couple of minutes? Oh, hey, the Titan has shown up, only to be stopped at his own base. Johnny jukes out 2 of the chains. Third one's not enough. Jangaru tries to get away, has the beads from Julio, who's putting out so much damage. Lawbringer in, finds the stun, and it's a dive in by Johnny to find the basics. 7 in a row for the Bakasura. Hex Mambo are unstoppable in this matchup. North America cannot stand up to the might of Johnny, to the might of Hex Mambo. Hawkk finds another. Johnny's gonna make it a double, and no one can stop this EU team. They will go undefeated here in day number 1. The Titan down to a quarter, but the Athenian Sages with a goose egg in the win column. It's all Hex Mambo.
It is 6-0 for EU versus North America here on day number 1. And who could be happier than all our European teams? They set themselves up for a juicy matchup versus the Neverline Wargs in day number 2 to decide who qualifies for the main bracket. And the worst part for North America is one of them's dropping down to the lower bracket to face off against them again.
Yeah, we are still going to see some EU talent, at least on the lower end of the bracket there, having to fight their way through. But based on the performance that we've seen so far out of EU, we could be seeing some more EU versus EU matchup as the weekend goes on. This was, I mean, you described it perfectly. Hex Mambo has 2 playstyles. It's we're going to wait for 20-25 minutes, then hit the gas pedal, or we're going to slam the gas right at level 5. Seems that we got the latter here in game 2.
Yeah, we had the ladder for both of these games here versus the Athenian Sages, showing them a little respect, which I think they are due, that they are 100% due. If they didn't show them that respect, I think they do come unstuck, and I think we do see the Athenian Sages take at least a game off them. But the second that they're in control, the second they hit 20 minutes and you're not 5k up, Hex Mambo just unleash the gas, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Hex Mambo an absolute tear through not just game 1, but also here in game number 2. That's it for me and AJ here on the cast. We'll throw it back over to the desk to break down the set.
And it's not just set 2 from Hex Mambo, it's also set 1 that they played earlier on today.
Yeah.
Hex Mambo, EU, they've just been on a tear. And my goodness, Gore, there's no slowing down this team. The pace of game has picked up a little bit in this update. It seems like, at least after day 1 so far, and the matchups have been lopsided. 2-0 sets all across the board today. Now, it required a comeback in game 1. Game 1 was probably the biggest turnaround we saw today. Sages were up 5k gold, and Hex Mambo came back. But let's talk game 2. And let's talk the Bakasura, Gore, because there were plenty of bans centered around the jungle. And Johnny still found his way to a hyper carry.
Yeah, Johnny's a great jungler. And that might just be the stop of the analysis. I mean, I don't know if there's much more to really dive into. He's just really good. You know, it's one of those things. I was looking at like old highlights, and one of the things that like stood out to me is Johnny getting a penta against the Kings a couple of years ago. You look at just what he's been able to do, all of a sudden jumping down back into the SEC. And if he is in point, whether it's like a meta for his gods or not, he just always seems to be a really big driving factor, driving force for his team. And it seems like right now, whatever Hex Mambo's got going on around him is just making it flourish. It's so easy to talk about the Bakasura because it looks so good here, but I also, again, have to give shout-outs. It's the right side of this map that is just so deadly for Hex Mambo because you get Johnny on the hyper carry, you get Julio on the tier, and we had talked about it going into it. You had alluded to it. But for those of you who don't remember, that was a must ban. It's another one that if you let Julio have this god, the game might as well have been over before you even loaded in. And it feels like you've kind of got some of these combinations that Hex Mambo just has. And the way they played together on the right side of the map looks really good. Hawkk has a ton of damage, ton of kill pickups. And again, it's almost like they're stealing the limelight a little bit. Because you get someone who's 8-0-3 in the jungle, and then Spudio's over there having a hell of a game, does, again, a good amount of damage for the length of the game, goes 2-0-5. And it's almost impossible to look at the Hachi because of what the Baka, what the tier are doing, what the team has accomplished. I don't know. I'm just really impressed with Hex Mambo, man. They came in today. They came in second seed from Europe nonetheless, but have proven themselves as a team that had something to prove. And I think this is just the start. It feels like they've got something going on, something special about being here.
Something about Hex Mambo and Master score. Yeah. It's a perfect support KDA from the front line, 0-1-7, 0-1-8. All the carries get all the kills. Yep. You can't write it up any better. And Hex Mambo really happy with the way that day number 1 of their Masters went. Julio back here with Hex Mambo and standing by with J-Mac for the postgame.
Yeah, so I got Julio here, the solo laner for Hex Mambo. First off, congrats on the 2-0 win, I guess the 4-0 total for today so far. How does it kind of feel? You know, it's back to your first competitive season in a little bit, coming out with a dominant, second seed at least for the phase to come into this event, and now finding, 2 big wins over here. I mean, how does it kind of feel for your squad so far?
Well, it's really good. That was the plan actually to win 2, obviously. But yeah, as you said, second seed. We should have gotten first seed, but we kind of messed up the last game. And coming in this new patch, we kind of screamed like 2 or 3 times, I think. So we were kind of not scared, but no one really knew how to play like the picks and bans, maybe draft. But yeah, I think we did pretty good, and we're confident going into the next set.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have been just kind of running through your opposition over here. I believe you have to face off against the Niflheim Wargs later in the weekend, another EU versus EU matchup there. Kind of against, one of the teams who, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was the number 1, or no, they were number 3 coming into it there. How does it feel kind of going up against some more EU opponents as this winter bracket goes through?
Well, EU is better than NA, and we are currently showing it, so, it's going to be fun, but not for the NA boys watching.
Not if you're a fan of North America. Now, maybe kind of piggybacking off of that one, since you're so close to being able to have that qualification through, should Hex Mambo make it to at least the play-in bracket up against the SPL teams, what other team alongside you are you imagining to kind of qualify with you?
Wait, who can qualify with us?
Well, literally anybody else so far in the SEC can bump up there, or maybe even the other SPL teams with the Glads, the Hounds. Who do you think is going to be kind of joining you up potentially for that quarterfinals?
Surely we qualify.
Right.
And then, I'm not going to lie, kind of don't know who's going to qualify, but I'm pretty sure we can.
You guys for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys for sure. Well, congrats on the 2-0 win for you today. I'll let you get back with the team so we can celebrate your wins. We'll see you a little bit later in the winners bracket. We'll throw it back to the desk to close it out.
Thank you.
A potentially safe answer is anyone from EU right now,
Yeah.
because that seems like the region that's just that's dominating.
The
in
only
EU
set
versus NA battles.
EU lost today was to EU. The only people who can beat them are themselves.
Oh, that's right. It's weird, a wild world we're living in right now. It's all existential. Gore, we had 4 best of 3s today. All of them go 2-0s.
Yeah.
And so it's moving forward, right? Whether on the upper bracket or the lower bracket, where things become. I mean, it was already interesting on day 1. More interesting now because you start to funnel the teams that went undefeated into one another, right? And then the teams that just lost their sets 2-0, they're starting to get funneled in towards one another. And so match 5 and match 6, that is the start of the losers bracket tomorrow. Valhalla Valkyrie, Solar Scarabs, Weavers versus Sages. And then we'll bounce over to the other bracket for a little while and then back down here to Hex Mambo, Niflheim Wargs. So we'll bounce around tomorrow. That's all besides the point. Doesn't matter. I'm telling you about some weird stuff that simply doesn't exist in our brain. I'm getting all over the place. Score was a whole bunch of 2-0s today. And that's what really matters.
And I'm excited for tomorrow just because, again, Sages Weavers, that matchup, an NA matchup, 1 versus 2 seed, which is honestly for an elim match, absolutely insane.
Yep.
I think that you're in a very similar spot looking at just one EU team down, getting immediately eliminated, or potentially immediately eliminated tomorrow. A lot of opportunity to fight through that lower bracket. I think a really spicy matchup towards the top. And so if I'm looking at Mambo Wargs right now, both of them not just undefeated, but looking really good in all of their games. I just think there's a lot to look forward to tomorrow. And the spice of elimination, just adding a little more flavor to it.
That's right. Today was all about separating upper bracket from lower bracket. Tomorrow we will be sending teams home. And so SMITE Masters heats up a bit as we move on over the course of the weekend. That's it for day number 1, though. 4 best of 3s, all done. 4 best of 3s tomorrow. Remember, starting at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Right here at twitch.tv/SmiteGame. I've been Dolson. That's been Goremizer. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you tomorrow.